Once upon a time, DLC was a concept completely unheard of. If someone wanted to add something to their game, they had to release a whole new version, not like Kingdom Hearts Final Mix or Super Street Fighter 2. Okay, that's not entirely accurate. Before we go any further, let's define exactly what DLC is and how it differs from an expansion pack. An expansion pack would be something you had to buy physically in stores, usually an additional CD-ROM or something of that nature, while DLC literally translates to downloadable content, which means it is added to the game via downloading off an online connection. Seems pretty straightforward, but I know a lot of people use the terms interchangeably when they really aren't the same thing. Because of this definition disparity, the history of DLC is a little murky. Most sources suggest the first console to have DLC for its games was the Dreamcast, but the first real DLC was for a game simply called Creatures by Mindscape Incorporated. The only thing I could find pertaining to this DLC was that it was a Christmas pack of some kind released in 1997. After that, there are conflicting reports as to which games got what DLC until the early 2000s when the internet started to gain traction. DLC didn't really become mainstream until Xbox Live rolled around in 2002. People could download games, updates, and expansion packs through services like Xbox Live, and eventually led to Sony and Nintendo getting in on this with their respective online services. Then we get to microtransactions. A subcategory of DLC, a microtransaction is where you pay a considerably small price, usually around the 99 cents to $4.99 range, to download or unlock something. Now, not all microtransactions are technically DLC. For example, some microtransactions involve paying for premium currency to unlock resources. Not quite DLC. In 2006, the first microtransaction sold by a publisher was the infamous Oblivion horse armor for $2.50. Despite the backlash, it sold pretty well and companies saw an opportunity. In 2008, the iOS store was launched and many apps came with microtransactions of their own. In 2011, Apple reported the sales figures and they're pretty staggering. Gaming apps generate so much profit for companies compared to other types of apps. And this is just Apple. If you consider almost half of smartphone users are Apples, over half of these companies' revenue comes from mobile games. Many console and PC developers have seen this success and have added microtransactions into their games as well, boosting profits significantly. So DLC seems like a good idea on the surface, adding extra knickknacks, fixing bugs, and maybe even expanding on story, and the companies make a lot of profit off of it. Everyone wins, right? Like with any good thing, someone will find a way to exploit it and ruin it. To make a simple thesis statement about why gamers like and don't like specific DLC practices, DLC needs to be ratioed properly. What you pay for needs to reflect not only the game itself, but other similar available content. To make a longer one, strap in. The begged question is, how much is DLC worth? Well, let's take a look at two examples from the same game, the Shivering Isles expansion and the Horse Armor. The Shivering Isles is an expansion of an already enormous story. What's the price? $30. Before you wince at that, let's take a look at what you get in it. You get a new storyline, a new fantastic area to explore, as well as new items and spells. The average time completing this DLC, if you don't get sidetracked by quests, caves, and loot, is a good 10+ hour adventure, where the main quest for Oblivion will run about 15 hours. You almost get more content by comparison. If this were food, the regular Oblivion would be a double cheeseburger for $6, and the Shivering Isles would be an extra single cheeseburger for $3. Good bang for buck ratio, good DLC. Now let's move on to the Horse Armor DLC. This DLC will only cost you $2.50 or $5 depending on when you buy it. That's not a lot of money. Yet the Horse Armor is almost universally reviled as the worst example of DLC in history. Why? There are a few factors. The first of which is that the fact that the Horse Armor DLC only contained the horse armor, nothing else. Two interns probably spent a long weekend putting this together, and instead of giving it out as free DLC, Bethesda tried to make a quick buck off of a low-effort, zero-creativity addition to the game.
I know, I'm just as shocked as you are.
Considering how much content you get in Oblivion for regular price, many felt that the ratio for this useless and ugly cosmetic was very imbalanced by comparison, especially since modders can get you better looking stuff for free. If this were food, regular Oblivion would be a double cheeseburger, but getting an extra ketchup packet costs 50 cents, when most other places will give you that stuff for no extra cost. I think what really got a lot of fans riled over the horse armor is the fact that Bethesda was basically telling its player base, you'll buy anything from us no matter how bad or how much the cost. Deal with it.
And the annoying part is that they were right.
Let's turn to other types of DLC, starting with additional story DLC. Now, there are a lot of negative connotations around this kind of DLC because some publishers hid their true endings behind paywalls. Asura's Wrath is the biggest offender of this, and I will never shut up about it. But it can also be seen somewhat in Kingdom Hearts 3 and the Remind DLC. But there are other story-based DLC that expand and enrich without being absolutely necessary to understand or enjoy the story of the base game. Let's take a look at one of the better examples of this in the DLC for Mass Effect 2. In Mass Effect 2, you can meet up with a former crewmate and a possible love interest in Liara. If you have the Lair of the Shadow Broker DLC, then you can join Liara on her mission of vengeance against a new villain. You also learn an interesting but technically unnecessary world-building detail from Liara that it was the Shadow Broker who tried to sell Shepard's body to the Collectors before she intercepted it and sent the body to Cerberus, who eventually resurrected Shepard. While this is a technically unnecessary world-building detail in the grander scope of Mass Effect 2's story, it still gives more context to vague details of the story and presents it in an entertaining way. You see the trick? You can completely skip the Lair of the Shadow Broker DLC and you don't miss anything except some chances to woo Liara, some Easter eggs, and extra lore. The story makes the world of Mass Effect deeper without being absolutely needed. Even if you don't buy the DLC, Liara goes on to take down the Shadow Broker on her own, so you aren't missing out on anything in Mass Effect 3. One DLC I both love and am annoyed by is the Trespasser DLC for Dragon Age Inquisition. Spoiler warning. Inquisition's core ending was, for lack of a better term, anticlimactic. The nothing villain known as Corypheus dies, politics happen, and Solus is revealed to be an old evil god and partway responsible for the whole events of Inquisition? What? How? Need some more information here! Long story short, many people felt Inquisition's ending was incomplete. The Trespasser DLC gives more needed context to the details presented in the core game's epilogue. It much better sets up Solus to be the main villain in Dragon Age 4, and gives you a much better idea of where the story is going. I, along with many others, felt Corypheus as a horribly weak villain, but this DLC revealed the full truth that an amazing villain was right next to us all along. I was so bamboozled and I loved it. It felt like the story was complete, and now I'm emotionally torn about keeping my promise to not purchase any more EA products. However, I was also irritated beyond belief that I had to get the DLC to get an emotionally satisfying and complete ending. Was this planned from the start, or was this like Mass Effect 3 and the DLC was meant to fix the original lackluster ending? Either way, I didn't appreciate that I had to shove out an extra $15 to feel like I didn't waste my time with Inquisition. One kind of DLC that many consider inoffensive is cosmetics. Now, this stance varies wildly on the price of the cosmetics, the quality of the cosmetics, and if the cosmetics have any impact on gameplay. Say a character's base model of a competitive game has clunky animations that make it harder to use the character, but a DLC skin cleans up all the animations and makes them really smooth. It could get to the point that some games require you to have a skin for a certain character for that character to be viable. If so, then the developers have failed and they should feel bad for it. Case in point, League of Legends. Many skins affect gameplay by causing visual impairment. The animations of specific skins could cause misleading hitboxes, hard to see animations, distracting particle effects or animations, or in worst cases, camouflage, making them difficult to track in teamfights. Let's take another example of cosmetics. Let's hypothetically say a Final Fantasy game had DLC that gave you a blouse for Tifa. It's super cute and only costs $5. The catch is that when equipped, it gives you the effect of a ribbon, a powerful defense item that blocks almost all status ailments. Most people would agree that this is a terrible DLC. The cosmetic has a huge impact on active gameplay, making it a pay-to-win scheme. Alright, let's try again. Let's say a cosmetic DLC gives a pair of cat ears to Kasumi of Dead or Alive. The ears even flick about as if they were real. The cost is $15, but the ears also unlock a unique animation for Kasumi's fighting move and a unique soundtrack when equipped. A lot of people would be on the fence about this DLC. Clearly a lot of effort and care was put into this cosmetic, and it has some nice perks that don't affect active gameplay in any way. However, $15 can seem kinda steep for a price of cosmetics. The best kind of paid cosmetic DLC would probably look like something along the lines of a $10 price tag, a full overhaul of a character's looks, and maybe a few additional voice lines. It doesn't have to be fancy, it just has to be done with care. Heroes of the Storm does this very well. Many of the pricier skins that change up animations and voice lines, such as Dreadlord Jaina, usually don't go past $8. But ultimately, we live in a market economy. That means prices are set by what people usually pay for things. AKA, people vote with their wallets, and they're voting hard right now. If someone absolutely has to have that $10 skin for their waifu for lifeu, they're gonna buy it no matter what anyone else says. Quality is subjective. What one person finds appalling, another will tout as the greatest thing they've ever seen in their life. One person's trash is another man's treasure. Another type of DLC is new modes and features. Many games that update frequently do this, such as Team Fortress 2, Overwatch, and literally every MOBA. With low cost or free games on this scale, it's natural to see some microtransactions for some premium currency or cosmetics. These companies do need to spend money to not only maintain the servers, but to also pay programmers, artists, marketers, and editors to add additional content and make sure people keep playing, especially if the game is free to play. So yeah, there's a lot of scummy stuff happening with DLC. But if almost half of the company's profits are coming from DLC and microtransactions, then there's really not much incentive to stop. Companies wouldn't keep doing these practices if they didn't work. If you came to this video looking for a solution to the DLC problem, well, I'm sorry, I don't really have one, and I don't think there is one. The only real thing to do is to be the example for others to follow, and that's not a change that happens overnight. That said, there is hope. Recent DLC successes include Ghost of Tsushima that added a multiplayer mode, quality of life tweaks, and additional cosmetics, all for free. Hopefully that's a signal of better things to come. The title of this video is The Decline of DLC. However, that name might be misleading. DLC has in some ways gotten better. More content, more expedient bug fixes, and more creative things done with cosmetics. What usually angers people is the scummy practices behind the DLC. The overpricing, the withholding critical parts of the game behind a paywall, and the message that you're nothing more than a walking wallet. This is what I mean when I say that DLC is in decline. Hopefully, someday, we'll find a way to fix that.
God